Welcome back. Today in our Sunday Spotlight, it was grueling, dangerous work. We're talking about whaling. And now a local author has pulled together entries from a crew member's daily journal into a compelling new book. It's called The Watch's Wild Cry, a voyage aboard the whaling vessel Clarabelle. Andrew German is that editor, and he joins me this morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
I want to talk a lot about the book because it was super interesting, but just generally, whaling, I mean, we know New London's the whaling city, New Bedford, some of these other big cities around here, but this was a big part of the economy back in the time when this book was written.
It was probably about the fifth largest American industry in the 1840s, just before Robert Weir went whaling, but it continued through the 19th century as a major industry, kind of remarkable from our perspective because they were slaughtering some very magnificent creatures out there, but the sea was a source of resources and whale oil was rendered and used for lighting in ways that we would now use electricity, but and for as a lubricant in the growing New England industry, say the textile industry, so that there were prime uses before petroleum was discovered to have many of the same capabilities.
So I want to talk a little bit about this actual book. And what this is a young man named Robert F. Weir.
Correct.
This is his journal.
It is his journal, yes.
That he kept while he was on the whaling ship Clarabelle.
Correct.
It's in longhand, and it exists at the, I believe, the Mystic Seaport Museum.
Correct. Yes, it's one of the prize manuscripts at the museum because of its illustration and because it's such a breezy, wonderful.
Well, that's the word I said when you came in. I said it was way breezier to read than I thought it would be.
Yes.
So what did you have to do to take that journal and make it into this book?
It had been copied, transcribed. All of the portions of it were ready to go in a sense. We did go through to make sure that the spellings were more or less consistent and some of the abbreviations made sense. But what I did really was go through and try to imagine what the reader might need to know about some of these arcane things that whalemen did, or just the ways that a ship was handled at sea. And having been at Mystic Seaport for many years and having rowed whaleboats there and set sails there and knowing better than many people how this experience would feel and what you would need to know, I tried to add notes that would help the reader as they read through, just so they could understand
and we talked about how big of an industry it was, and we're talking about the Clarabelle, and this is from 1855 to 1858,
right,
is when he was underway on that ship, but 700 vessels, 20,000 men in all. And were many of them he describes the Clarabelle, or maybe in one of your notes it was, that it's the main vessel,
correct,
and then there were 4 whale boats that would be launched off that vessel,
correct,
each with a crew.
Yes.
And so sort of the homage here in the title is there would be a lookout looking for a whale.
Correct.
And he talks many days about that lookout seeing nothing.
Exactly.
And they're just at the mercy of the wind out in the sea, no sign of land, and they're just waiting.
That's it.
And yet, when a whale was found, it was moments of excitement, of terror, of intense racing to get that whale.
Yes.
And you talked about how today the whale would be so protected. It is so protected.
Yes.
But he talks many times about probably mortally wounding a whale and it just going to the bottom.
Right, yes. There was probably a lot of sort of ambient loss, unfortunately, and the way they handled other creatures that they came across, there was kind of an ethos of, oh, let's kill it, which is foreign to most of our modern take. But he does seem to find whales awesome in a sense, but at the same time, their job was to subdue it, kill it, and then turn it into oil.
Well, and I thought it was interesting throughout the book, he oftentimes refers to a various whale that he came in contact with as Mr. Whale, which I think is so interesting. But he does comment in there that on the ship, they worked like horses and lived like pigs. It was a tough life.
It was a very tough life. And it was basically 30 men living in this very confined space for, well, in this case, 3 years, occasionally up to 5 years, until they could fill the hold with oil. Often the crews didn't get along very well. They were a very broad mix of individuals. He happened to be a much more educated and sort of refined person than most of his shipmates. They often carried crew members from the Azores, Portuguese as they were called, and there was often sort of cultural conflict on board. which he kind of alludes to but doesn't specify. So, and then in the case of the Clarabelle, they were whaling in the Indian Ocean, which wasn't the prime whaling center, but it is fascinating for us because he's commenting on Madagascar and the Comoro Islands and places that are really exotic, not like the South Seas, but very exotic in their own right.
So you said 33 months they were underway. They came back with 40,000 gallons of whale oil, 1,900 pounds of bone that was valuable, and he did all this for about 12,000 bucks.
Yes. And
in today's dollars.
In today's dollars, right. And the way whalemen were paid, they were signed on for a share of the profits of the voyage, so they had no idea what they would be making at the end. Everything that they received from the vessel to resupply themselves with clothing or whatever was charged with interest against their final payment. So it was, it took great advantage of the labor, but men found it, or young men especially like Weir, found it fascinating, a way to see the world and to prove themselves in a sense.
Well, I sat down to read it and I was ready to be back in high school. I thought it was a class project and I was going to, it reads very quickly. It's a very interesting tale and he is very breezy in his writing, probably ahead of his years. We only have about 30 seconds left, but who do you hope reads this book? Who's the designed audience of this thing?
I think anyone who's fascinated by a young man's search for adventure, kind of proving himself in a way. He was the son of a very famous artist. His brothers were artists, prominent in Connecticut, so that there's that side of the story too, which sort of fills in some of the artistic story. So
well, and there was a lot of human element. I mean, he doesn't, we don't really know why, but he somehow shamed his family and ran off to a whaling ship, and his sister, he loved her and missed her and talks of her often, and they didn't have Christmas dinner on the ship, but he wondered what they were doing at home. It's just a human tale.
We're under the same moon, but I'm so far from them. So yes, it's a very human tale.
Well, it's available. You can get it now, and maybe if you're into this kind of stuff, it's a good read. Andrew German, writing about Robert Weir. Thank you so much for being with us, and we appreciate you being here on CT24.
Appreciate it as well. Thank you.
And again, the book is called The Watch's Wild Cry, A Voyage Aboard the Whaling Vessel Clarabelle. It's edited by Andrew German.